Hey there, what I see is people letting their businesses run their lives versus them leading their business to love their life. I see this in corporate jobs, and I see where we step into expectations that other people have of us that do not honor us and allow us to lead our own life. Welcome to this episode, and I'm glad you're here to listen. From the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. We are in a series, and this series is about the universal laws. And I am a coach and a leadership coach, as well as a business coach. And I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. And a big piece of what I do is help people figure out and have clarity about what it is that they want, so that as entrepreneurs, they can make that happen. And not just in business, it's also in life. I work with other people too that have career jobs through corporate America. And so one of the things that I teach on is the universal laws to help us back up, look through the lens of curiosity, own who we are, and move forward and step into more life. So this series of universal laws, and if this is the first podcast you're catching, you can go back and catch the prior versions of this. Well, not versions of this particular one, but of the other laws that I'm talking about. And I guess it's a little fitting for this week due to some personal things that I've had going on, that the universal law that came up for me to talk about today is really two. The first one is the law of sacrifice, and the second one is the law of choice. And all of these laws intermingle with each other, but these two are two that are really interlocked. And what I mean by that is the universal law of sacrifice. Well, let's back up. Sometimes the word sacrifice can really freak people out. And I know the first time I heard this, all I could think about, because my mind was in this scarcity mindset, all I could think about was, what am I losing? I have to sacrifice something. I have to get rid of something, instead of looking at what's the gain. There's a really good book out there called The Gap in the Game that talks about that. And I'm in a group and we tease that the Gap is only a clothing store, but we tend to focus on what we're losing or how much more we have to do to get somewhere, or to do the goal that we want, how much further we have to go, versus looking at what have we done and what are we gaining from this. So basically what the law of sacrifice says is that we have to give up something of a lower nature, and it's not hierarchical, but just of a lower vibration, lower energy, things that aren't serving us well, things that aren't serving us well, so that we can go out and serve others to have more life. And so giving up something of a lower nature to receive something of a higher nature. So part of it is, and I was having a conversation actually early this morning with my business coach, and we were talking about a program that I've been in, and how when I started that program, I didn't realize how many things I had come into contract with in my mind and internally that I was holding myself down with. And so looking at that, there are all sorts of things that play into what sometimes we have to let go of in order to open up to receive more. And so there's also a key piece in here about being open to receiving. So the next time someone offers to help you, pause and step back and say, am I resisting this help because of messages that we've received that it's weak to get help from people? Or am I open to receiving, giving them the gift of being able to give or provide something for me, and also knowing that getting that help from someone will propel me forward, right? So kind of to get back to this, the law of sacrifice can fall into all sorts of different realms. I'm going to share a few examples of where the law of sacrifice has played and applied into my life, because one of the things that Amir and I were talking about this morning is the laws tend to be theory until we see it happen, or until we experience it happening in our own lives. And it happens all the time, because just like the law of gravity, when we drop something, it falls. And so it's happening all around us, but a lot of times we're just not aware of it, nor do we see how that interplays. So when I think about the law of sacrifice, one of them is, I would say the law of sacrifice was after I graduated high school. I sacrificed 4.5 years to go to college to get a degree in education. Now, I don't look at that necessarily as a sacrifice, but I sacrificed time that I could have been doing something else. But instead, I got this degree, which now has helped me 10 times over, and it's propelled me forward in my life. Another area of the law of sacrifice would be when I left Kansas City. I lived in Kansas City from 1985 until 2014. That's a long time to be in one place. I went to high school there. I had a core group of friends there. I had a network there. I loved what I was doing, and I was making good money doing it, working at Citibank and at Sprint. But yet I felt this calling. And I don't know how to describe calling other than this desire that was put on my heart. And my best friend from college moved to Sandpoint prior to that. And I was able to come visit, and I was able to do things where I was exposed to Sandpoint. And Sandpoint, for those of you that don't know, is 60 miles south of the Canadian border in the panhandle of Idaho. I sit on a glacier-fed lake with mountains. The ski resort is very close. And so when I visited here, I knew that someday I wanted to come here. I wanted this to be my home. I felt this like spiritual connection here. And the fact that even though I was from the Midwest, thinking that temperate, like the temperatures were maybe a little more temperate, I am so much more active here because it's a way of life. And so the law of sacrifice at the time was, I was shifting and decided, my then husband and I decided we would move here, and left our son in college. He was in his last semester of college in Springfield, Missouri, and took the trek to move out here. And I moved here in January. He followed me in May. And so when I think about all of the things that go into that, and I could see it as potentially losing. Now, I've stayed in touch with really good friends still, and I still have those connections in Kansas City. But at the time, I was sacrificing what was comfortable to step into the more life. And I have been reading The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And it was really interesting. There was a quote in there that, to me, the law of sacrifice and the law of choice really play into. And he says here that we as humans tend to resist life. And a lot of it is because of the messaging that we've received and the fact that we receive messages about struggling. And so he says here that humans resist life, and to be alive is the biggest fear that humans have. So a lot of times when we look at the law of sacrifice, when we're sacrificing and giving up something of a lower nature to receive something of a higher nature, sometimes our subconscious brains take over because we know we're stepping into more life. And when I talk to clients, that idea of leaving behind what's behind us and stepping forward sometimes is so scary. And I've been there, where it feels like you're walking across and asking to take a step that would take you across the Grand Canyon, when in fact, once you take the step, you see that it was really a crack in the sidewalk. That now that you're going forward, and you have a different perspective, you see things differently. So the law of sacrifice tells us also we have to be open to receiving. My MO used to be no, and I don't have enough time. And so when I would play those stories over and over and over again in my mind that I don't have time, and I still fall into that sometimes, I'm not going to lie, that's a pattern that's been a tough one for me to break. But it can be just that easy, is what I say. That's why I have an easy button sitting here on my desk. But when I think about being open to receive, it's also knowing who I am and knowing and listening to my intuition. And for me, it's the spirit, like listening to spirit tell me through the nudges in my heart, through my intuition, what is right for me. And so being open to receiving, and sometimes we're open to receiving and it doesn't turn out. And that's okay, because it taught us a lesson. It moved us forward. And so looking at what that higher nature is, when we let go of something, it propels us forward. Now, another example sometimes is people. There are times that, now I'm not a proponent necessarily of divorce, but like I knew that I either had to get off this train with my ex-husband or I wasn't going to go do what I felt I needed to do to help other people have more life. And so that's where choice comes into play. And, it was not an easy choice. And it was something that took a long time to be able to choose. But when I think back and I even look at where my ex is today and where he's at in his life, and it's allowed him to have more life as well. And it's allowed me to have more life. Sometimes it's groups of friends. Sometimes it's that you're moving further in your business and they're not. Doesn't mean you have to sacrifice the friendship. You just may not talk about that part anymore. But it allowed me then, when I realized some of that with business, it allowed me to step into a program where I'm surrounded by 20 plus women who I know when they give me feedback, the intention is to help make me better. And it's usually given in the form of questions to make me figure it out myself. So by realizing some of that, it allowed me to then step in. It allowed me to then come in and do what I do and quadruple my income and quadruple the amount of clients that I am seeing. The other piece of it is around things. This idea of law of sacrifice, and I love Marie Kondo. I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly, but and if you haven't watched any of her stuff, it's out on Netflix. But really what she says is we surround ourselves with things. And when you have all of these things, if you think in the relationship to energy, they all have a certain amount of energy. One example is that I sacrificed having this stack of books next to my bed. And I did that because every morning I'd get up and see the books. And every night before I went to bed, I would see the books and I would subconsciously beat myself up for not having read anything. And so sometimes it's slight nuances. Other times it's bigger than that. I also am a firm believer that the law of sacrifice, when it comes to like Marie Kondo, is look at the things that you have surrounding you in your office space, in your car, in your house. And is it cluttered? Usually what's on the external shows what's in the internal. So I know I was living with a lot of clutter and I thought, I don't want all this clutter. So I've been purging. And, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I cleaned out my pantry. And yes, I found like almond flour from 2017 and it's 2022 for gracious sakes. So there are times that we just hold on to things and it takes up space. And so for me, all of these things in my pantry and these things in my kitchen were taking up space for me to have an organized area that then I could have foods and things for me that I know honor my body and that I know I feel healthy when I am doing that. So those are some examples of the law of sacrifice when it comes to like physical locations, things that you own, people in your life. And a big one for this too is sometimes letting go of beliefs that we have learned through time. And that's one of the big things that I do with my clients is I help them uncover what are the beliefs that you have about money? What are the beliefs that you have about work? For years, I thought I had to work 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, because that's what I did in corporate America. But then I realized, hey, I don't have to come in on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday until noon or 1 o'clock, and I can go ski in the morning. And so it's about looking at those things and letting go of some of the mindsets that we have so we can step in and have this fulfilling life. Yesterday, I was so excited. And one of the great things for me about like sacrificing sometimes to be in business for myself is this idea of sometimes the safety thing, right? Like sometimes people feel safe when they have a paycheck come in regularly. When you're an entrepreneur, there's a little bit more risk with that. And I love that. And here's why. I have the flexibility yesterday to go walk down the street, get some exercise in, and watch my 30-year-old son coach 7th grade football and see him changing the lives of these kids as he's working with them and how he's interacting with them. So the law of sacrifice actually brings about more life for you. Now, the key to this is the law of choice. And that is our superpower, because the law of choice is our greatest power. And we have been given this ability to interrupt and redirect the train of causation. Remember when I talked about the law of cause and effect? There's a train of causation always happening. And we are always in cause. It just depends on what effect we want. So here's where choice comes into play. We have a pattern. So if you think of a circle, we have this pattern that we repeat over and over and over again. And our power to choose allows us to interrupt that circle and redirect the actions through choosing new beliefs, new thoughts, new feelings, and creating then the action to go make that happen. So again, when we think about choice, we have the choice to continue to believe the way we are believing, or I've done that before, is a big one that people will say when they're resisting, or I don't know. And then I always come back and say, what if you did know? Because we do know deep inside, we just have to trust ourselves. So thinking about new beliefs and old beliefs that we need to let go of. Thinking about our thinking patterns. Are you someone that tends to look at all of the wrong things that are happening? Because I will tell you, if you start going down that path, things will happen. And they will continue to happen, and they will continue to get bigger. If you're someone that looks at and thinks, oh, okay, this airplane had a mechanical error, and yeah, I'm going to be late and I may not get there until the next day, but I'm sure glad that they found the mechanical area or issue, why it was on the ground versus why it was in the air and me being on it, right? Because that could have had other consequences. And so, yes, are there things that happen? Are there things that come up that aren't necessarily the way I'd want them to go? Absolutely. But we have to be able to let go of that and think differently. Think about how the learning or the benefit of it, the gain, not the gap. Our feelings, how are we feeling about something? And a lot of times people shy away from feelings, but this emotional intelligence is so important. So letting go of taking things personally. Really, when you take things personally, that's a selfish behavior because it's really not about you. And so stepping back and letting go of some things around how we feel, facing the feelings, moving forward, but changing how we feel about certain things. And then last but not least, taking different actions, creating different habits. In the book Atomic Habits, which I highly recommend, he talks about a gentleman who wanted to lose weight. Well, we have the goal to lose weight, and he had a certain number of pounds he wanted to lose, but we have to figure out what habits we need to create. Well, a lot of times we say, oh, we just need to exercise and change what we're eating, and I'm going to start inputting into MyFitnessPal, and that's the habit I need to create. Well, this gentleman took a little different approach, and he went to the gym for 30 days, did 1 rep, turned around and left, because he realized that the core habit that he needed to have was he needed to become the man that showed up every day at the gym. That's the habit he needed to create, not the workout habit, but the habit of going to the gym. Now, that may or may not be what your habit needs to be. Everyone has a little bit different perspective on what that habit is. But if you dig to what the core habit is, then you're able to make lasting change. So he continued to go to the gym, and he's like, well, I'm here, I might as well do some more reps. And then he does a few more, and then he does a few more, and he has lost a lot of weight and is healthy now, and has done that through this idea of just start, right? If you're not a reader and you want to start reading, read 1 page. Because at the end of a week, you're going to have read 7 pages more than you would have had you not started. So this power of choice to be able to create different actions and habits. You know, as an example, part of a habit that I always do, and I learned this actually years ago in Weight Watchers, is that I try to park in a faraway parking space so I get a few more steps in. It's the little things that do make a difference. I know the gentleman that wrote Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, what his intention was, but I think the small stuff is what makes it, what creates the big moves. And so looking at the law of sacrifice and the law of choice, you have to make the choice to sacrifice what it is that you're going to let go of so that you can be open to receiving and step into more life. And with that, folks, that's a wrap. If you would like to talk more about any of these universal laws, or you're just stuck or confused about what you want to do, please, please, please go out to www.leadyourlituplife and sign up for a clarity call. I promise you at the end of 30 minutes, you will have more clarity about what you want than you did when you got on the phone or on Zoom with me. And with that, everybody have a fantastic week. Talk soon. Bye-bye.